Have you ever felt a cold sting, the kind that sears through the heart? I did. My life, once lightened by Lily's laughter and love, darkened under a veil of betrayal. "Why, Lily?" My voice cracked as I confronted the duplicity. My heart wouldn't listen, blinded by love for the woman who brought joy into my mundane existence. The sorrow was balanced by my anger. I was angry at Lily, but I fostered a bitter, unquenchable anger at Bennington and the two other men involved. This is my story. Enjoy watching it. I took the Central Line train at Loughton after driving from Abyss Roding as I did every day. A lot of small towns in North Essex end with the name Roding. They got their names from the River Roding, which starts in the East Anglian Heights, flows south, winding through the area, and changes its name to Barking Creek before it meets the Thames. Some folks say Roding like roofing, a name from way back in Anglo-Saxon times when the river was called For Odinga. Back then, they said the letter D differently. It's pretty cool how we live every day on this island, surrounded by signs of history that's more than 1,000 years old. Taking the train at Loughton made more sense because there was more space to park the car than at Ongar. Anyway, the train from Ongar to Epping stopped running in 1994, maybe because not many people used it like I did. Riding the train was just a time to let my mind wander, automatically noticing stations without needing to look at the signs. I've done this trip so many times that watching the scenery wasn't interesting anymore. Same stuff, day in, day out. Views of the backs of row houses built once the train line reached out into Essex. A stretch of life following the rail towards open fields, leaving the dirt and bustle of London behind. Places where goods were once moved are now packed with cars at stations, since this has turned into a place for commuters. The sound of the tracks joined by others from the suburbs let me know where we were, feeding me and thousands into the city's heart. That was the city life, the high pitch of electric motors. As the train picked up speed, then a loud sound and a feeling in my ears as we dipped into tunnels just big enough for the train told me we had left Leighton. A climb brought us back to daylight at Stratford, followed by another drop into the dark. None of these things took my eye off the morning paper, but I still knew where I was without looking out of the window. At Mile End, lots of people got off to switch trains, and just as many filled in the gaps, leaving us packed tight. My stop was next at Bethnal Green. The train was so full that as soon as we left Mile End, I started to push my way to the doors. I squeezed through people, all stuck close in the train. On my way, I bumped into others more than any of us liked. My briefcase got caught and skirts made it hard to move, but I made it to the doors right when the train stopped. They opened, and I pushed against people getting on to get out. Walking out into fresh air felt good. The London Underground is really old and has some problems. The biggest issue is there's no air conditioning. The people who made it couldn't have guessed we'd need that or how crowded it would get. My office wasn't far, and I liked the walk. A door next to a small shop led to a steep staircase. The shopkeeper, who came from Punjab, smiled and made a joke about how on time I was by showing me his watch. Another door at the top of the stairs took me into my office, which had 2 rooms. The big room in front was where I worked, with my desk and places for files. The smaller room was a mix of a kitchen and a spot with a toilet. It wasn't fancy, but it was all I needed since I worked alone. My work bag was next to my desk. I put the paper stack on the file case and went to the kitchen, filled the kettle, and turned it on to heat. Back at my desk, I checked the phone for any new messages, jotting down the ones that mattered. I opened the file case and grabbed the folder I was digging into. It held the numbers for a client of mine. Being a numbers guy, this was my zone. My name? Well, it's not important. I've gone by many names. Back in school, they called me Jesse because I was short and light. I was just 5'6" and very light back then. I'm still the same height, but I've put on weight now. The big kids, the mean ones, would call me Jesse and push me around without anyone stopping them. I picked up a key lesson there. Besides the school stuff, I figured out how the world spins. The tough kids, not caring much for school, were heading down a rough path but still needed to pass their tests without looking dumb. I really dug into my schoolwork and soon found myself in a spot where they needed me. So we struck a kind of peace. I helped them with their homework and exam cheats, and they left me alone while keeping other bullies away. Did I feel bad that they then picked on different kids? No. I grew up in the rough parts of London where every day was about the strong and the weak, with fights all the time. Being strong wasn't just about muscle, and guys learned early to use whatever skill they had to get by. Outsiders might call me a cockney, but they got it wrong. I wasn't born to the sound of big church bells. My dad worked at the docks, lining up every morning with others, hoping to get picked for the day's work. While working in a ship's belly, a net full of Brazil nuts broke and fell on him, killing him. Dock work was day by day, no steady jobs, so no money help came when he died. After he was gone, Mom took on 3 cleaning jobs to keep me fed and to make sure I looked right for school. Going to a better school meant needing sports clothes for cricket in the summer and rugby in the winter. She made it work, sometimes skipping her own needs so I had mine met. When I hit 23 and passed my exams for accounting, she left. I think she had a man in her life after Dad passed and felt her job was done once I could stand on my own. I never saw or heard from her again. In school, bullies stopped calling me Jesse. I was just Jess. It seemed like they found it better to keep me as a friend rather than a target for their mean fun. These bullies turned to a life of crime and still call me. Now I help make their money look clean for the tax folks. They can't say their cash comes from crime. So I made up businesses that show enough profit for them to report, leaving most of their earnings hidden and safe. I do well from this deal. My money is out in the open and taxed right, but a good chunk is hidden in banks far away from nosy leaders. To the taxman, I'm just a good, successful accountant. I also got a role you could call crime peacemaker. Big cities like London keep to themselves. In the world I move in, the bosses mark their own turf and say yes or no to the little guy's plans. The crime world is full of hotheads who hardly ever chat nicely. So now and then, Mr. Brown would ask me to talk about a snag with Mr. Green. Luckily, I'm a calm and easygoing guy, so I could step in, sort things out. Gang fights are bad news. They make too much noise in the media and bring the cops running. Soft talks help crime stay under the radar. Mr. Brown and Mr. Green aren't their real names, and they call me Mr. Smith. But I know who they really are. After all, I grew up with many of them. The fees for my help are my secret stash, safe from taxes. Crime's not like it used to be. No more bank jobs or hitting armored trucks. Now crime lives online, stealing card numbers and making fake ones. Almost everyone carries cards in their wallets like carrying lots of cash. My clients cash in on this. It feels almost like no one gets hurt since it's the big banks and insurance guys who lose. But let's be real. I'm breaking the law just by keeping secrets from my clients. In the UK, planning a crime is as bad as doing it. Our network ran smooth. But I was beginning to worry about my marriage. I thought my wife, Lily, was hiding something. I had no proof, no clues, no secret photos, no strange calls, no odd times away from home. It was the small things missing that made me suspect. Accountants dig into the little things. Most folks glance at their credit card bill and pay it or let the bank handle it through automatic payments. Not me. I looked closely at every item and the fees added on. If you think credit card companies never mess up, you're dreaming. Over recent months, Lily added a fancy dress and a sharp suit to her clothes. Even I noticed they weren't cheap. At first, I was happy she wanted to dress up for me, and she did wear them to parties we went to together. Mainly, she wore them to her job. They were fancier than I'd choose for work clothes. What made me curious was how much they cost. What caught my attention was there was no charge for them on her credit card or our shared bank account. There was no big cash taken out either, so it looked like Lily got these clothes for free. I've always believed nothing comes for free in this world. So how did she get them? Maybe her job gave them to her. After all, receptionists need to look good as they are the first people you see at a place. But I couldn't shake off the worry that maybe another man bought them for her. Was there a hidden trade-off? Usually, if a guy buys a woman clothes, he might expect things to get personal. Was there another guy? I couldn't tell, but I felt I needed to look into it more. Some of it I could do, but I'd need others to help with most of it. I met Lily when I visited a client. She was the new receptionist and perfect for it. Cute, but not stunning. She was easy and nice to talk to. Her face was open and showed how she felt. She smiled when she talked to people, and she had a way of making others feel close to her. Lily was from Essex in the UK, a place often made fun of, but she was not like the rest. Yes, she liked high heels, but she made sure they matched her dress, and she almost never wore white. If she danced around her bag at a club, it was to keep it safe from thieves like Frank. He once said that many stolen credit cards he got were from folks in clubs. I met with Lily a lot because of work and got to know her pretty well. She wasn't very book smart, something she knew and didn't hide. But she was eager to learn and always asked questions to know more. She grew up in an orphanage, which explained why she didn't go to school much. Still, she knew how to look her best, always dressed nicely and with perfect makeup. I was surprised and happy when she said yes to going out with me. We went to a nice dinner place. She was comfortable with herself and didn't pretend to be someone else. We talked a lot and had a good time. We went out more to concerts, plays, and dancing. Lily was the same height as me and chose flat shoes for our dates, though she wore heels for work. I told her I didn't mind the heels. "Are you sure it's okay?" "Yes," I said. "I've always looked up to people, and looking up at you would be a joy." After that, she wore heels and looked amazing. She had beautiful legs. I asked her to marry me, and she said yes with tears and a smile. We had our honeymoon on Tenerife. Lily, at 25, was quite new to love, but she got really into it. I was 5 years older with more experience thanks to a few past romances. It felt great when Lily was shocked by my looks. Though I'm not tall, which might make some think all of me is small, I'm pretty average. But next to my slight build, I seemed bigger. Lily's excitement didn't fade even when we went back to our normal lives. Being an accountant is boring but pays well. I could support us both, but Lily liked her job too much to quit. After 3 years, she switched jobs to a place in Chelmsford. She was a receptionist again. She said it was quicker to get to Chelmsford than Stratford from our place in Abby's Roding, about 15 miles or half an hour's drive, compared to an hour to Stratford. This made sense, so I got her a sturdy Volkswagen Golf for her trips. Lily only used her car for work and shopping near her office. We drove mine the rest of the time since it was roomier and she liked being a passenger. The car service bills were in my files, showing how far it should have traveled. One weekend, while Lily was in the bath, I took a peek. I had figured out roughly how much she would drive, considering some extra trips in the last 7 weeks. But I saw her car had 400 miles more than my guess. Not a huge difference, but still. But when I did the math on her trips between checkups, she was hitting 60 more miles every week. Where to? I needed help. I knew where to find Frank at 11 in the morning. He'd be at the Starlight. It sounds like a cliche, sure. Bad guys owning clubs. But it makes sense. With so many folks in and out, tracking chats is tough. At this hour, to him, I was just a numbers guy needing a talk. Frank had just started his day with a coffee. He made one for me as soon as I walked into his office. "Trouble with the books, Jess?" Frank used to push people around in the old days. "No, Frank." I shook my head. "It's something else. A home issue." "Oh, I'm not a face fixer," he joked. He was quick. I forced a small smile and went on. "I need a guy to watch my wife, see where she's off to." He got serious. "You don't think she's—" He didn't finish. "It's possible," I said. He drank his coffee slow, then nodded. "I know a guy. He owes me." In Frank's world, everyone owed him. Maybe they didn't know it, but he had ways of calling in favors from anyone. "Want to meet him here? I can have him over." "This afternoon." I thought it over and then nodded. "Yeah, Frank. That'd be great. He'll be careful?" "He better be." He poured more coffee for us. "Jess, if she is messing around, you gonna leave her?" I'd thought about that. "No. If she fights, her lawyer will dig into my money. Can't have that." "No way," he said, catching on. "Got it. So here's the plan. I'll give her some cash each month to stay quiet. If needed, we can think of something more lasting." "Thanks, Frank. But no, that's too risky. A body always pops up. Don't want the cops at our door, plus I just can't do that to Lily." "You still have feelings for her?" "Yeah, I do, but if she's messing around, she's out. I can't stay with her, not ever." Later that day, I was back at the Starlight. A guy was there, all jittery. Frank's calls tend to do that. He introduced me then. "This is Mr. Smith. He's got a job for someone to tail his wife. Get the scoop on where she goes and who she meets." He let that sink in, then gave Vin a sharp look. "Mr. Smith is a close pal of mine. Let's keep it straight, shall we?" Vin nodded quick, wiping the sweat off his forehead. "Understood, Mr. Weston. Who am I following?" Where to? Now, that was the million-dollar question. Answering meant letting my guard down. It's my wife. Her name's Lily Martin. I handed him a piece of paper with my address. Follow her for 2 weeks to her work in Chelmsford and any other place she visits. I need details on who she meets outside work and home. Photos would be great. She leaves at 8:15, drives a silver VW Golf. I added the license plate number. He looked puzzled. Where's this place? Avis Roding. I saw he was stumped. It's near Chipping Ongar, about 6 miles north. He looked relieved, knowing where Chipping Ongar was. Okay, Mr. Martin, I'll start tomorrow. His confidence reassured me. Is Avis Roding a small town? He asked. If so, I'll stick out. He was right. Yeah, it's tiny. 1 car an hour is a traffic jam there, I thought for a bit. Here's the thing. She takes country roads initially, but then joins the A1060 south of Margaret Roding. That road's always busy. I handed him my card. He tucked it into his wallet and stood up. I'll call you in a few days to update you, he said. When it was just Frank and me, Frank called for more coffee. I don't get you, Jess. You're the most mixed-up guy I know. Even now, you're calm, thinking it all through. Don't you ever get mad? He asked. Yes, Frank, I do. Right now, I'm real mad. But being mad doesn't solve things. You have to think before you act so you don't end up in trouble. And you're willing to wait. How long? 2 weeks? 3? Maybe more. Then, you'll want to see some results. I'm talking a big pay. Say $1,000, plus money for the car. And if he finds nothing, then I'll be glad she's not messing around. But I feel she is. I kept going as usual. I knew how I appeared to others. A quiet, harmless guy in a gray suit with a briefcase. I even played up that look. Tons of us go to work like this every day. We sit at our desks, buried in papers, dull, safe, and plain. I liked being plain. Yet many of those guys had their secrets. Some had small ones, like looking at dirty magazines during lunch before heading home to their wives, who weren't as thrilling as those women on paper. Some were into betting or a secret drink at the bar before riding the bus or train home. I had my secrets, too. The first was my link to the underworld. Not even Lily knew about that. The second was that I was having Lily watched. My cold, calculating brain had seen a possible issue and figured out a way to learn more. Lily meant the world to me, not just because she was a sight for sore eyes, but because she brought fun into my life. My job was all about focus, numbers, and strict rules. But when I got home, Lily turned all that around. She was so full of joy, she made our home a place of laughs, happiness, and joy. The thought of her cheating ripped me apart. I'd be lost in hurt and pain. Then one Monday, I got a call. I've got something for you, Mr. Martin. We can talk over the phone or meet up. What do you prefer? I needed to brace myself, so I chose to meet at the Starlight. They knew me there, so I'd have some privacy. See you at 2:30, he said, then added, Sorry to say this, but your wife's been sneaking around. He went through his notes. From Tuesday to Thursday, she's at work all day, just stepping out for lunch. But on Friday, she left at 11:30 with someone in her car. They headed to Mark's and then to a hotel for lunch, he told me. They did this once a week for about 5 weeks. One time, a room was booked, and though he wasn't sure, it seemed she might have been there with the guy. My heart sank. Lily, why? I had to know more. How did you find all this out? He used to work in a hotel and knew not to ask the front desk. It was a soft blow, but it hit me hard. I cornered one of the porters. They know all that goes on and are willing to chat for a bit of cash. Can they tell who checks in? Yes. In the porter's room, they have a computer that shows the bookings. This way, they know where to take bags when someone arrives. Who is the man my wife is having lunch with? His name is Bennington. W. A. Bennington. I recognized the name. He was the top guy at the company where Lily works. I sat there, quiet, trying to understand this. All this showed was my wife had lunch with her boss, maybe once a week. Not ideal for her, but not really cheating. If she had told me, it would have been okay. But she didn't, making it a secret. She might or might not have been with him in a hotel room for 2 hours. You shouldn't blame when you can't prove. I needed more. Will you keep watching? Yes, Mr. Martin. There's something. Bennington has reserved a private room for next Friday. It's him and 3 others. I could get into the room beforehand. A friend of mine could set up some tiny digital cameras, if you think it might help. I looked at him. Won't they be noticed? He shook his head. No, Mr. Martin. They're so small he can hide them in air vents and smoke detectors. Do they take photos or video? Video? He'll need to stay close. To load the images onto a computer, the signal isn't that strong, but he can grab screenshots whenever you want. How much? He paused, maybe trying to figure out how much to ask. 100 for the porter and about 500 for my buddy? I agreed. Do it. I pulled my wallet out. Here's $2,000. Consider it pay for the week and for the expenses. That should cover your friend and the porter. I placed the money on the table. He didn't take it. Mr. Martin, I'll take the money for the costs, but you don't owe me for my time. I'm doing this as a favor for Mr. Weston. I looked up, surprised. Then I knew how Mr. Weston felt. Weston thinks people will help him out. Doing favors helps me too. And when someone does something great for me, I think that's worth a shout-out. Take the cash, I said. He grabbed it fast. Thanks, Mr. Martin. We walked out of the starlight together. He went one way and I flagged down a taxi. The club was close to Canary Wharf, where it's now easy to find a taxi. It wasn't like that years ago. Back then, finding a taxi here was tough. People living in Docklands couldn't dream of affording a ride. But now, with so many money folks around, things have changed. The taxi dropped me at my office on Old Street. I sat there, staring into space. It looked like my future was set to be empty. Every morning, I'd ride the train, surrounded by people who knew nothing of my deep sadness. I'd spend my days at this desk, sorting numbers, but the ache in my heart would remind me of what I've lost. At night, I'd go back to a place that was no longer a home. It was empty, missing her laughter, her being, her voice. Even the scent she left behind was gone. This was going to be my life. Logic didn't matter. My heart felt the truth. She had shared herself with another, breaking the promise that was meant for me alone. Lily. Why? That night I felt really sick. I didn't know how I could avoid being close with Lily, as she'd expect in the coming days. Being close means sharing everything, hopes, dreams, raw feelings. I couldn't pretend well enough to trick her. She'd see something was wrong, but I didn't have to pretend to feel sick. The closer I got to our place, the worse I felt until I was truly sick. I wasn't kidding. Lily was really worried. "Have you eaten something bad?" she asked. I shook my head. "Maybe not, but I did have a kebab at noon." She was shocked. "A kebab? Chad, you know better. Reheated meat can make you sick. Why did you eat that?" Now she used another name. "My real name is Charles. Not many used it when I was young. Lily didn't like it. She said it sounded too fancy. Americans might call me Chuck, but in the UK, Chuck means to throw up. So she never used it starting when we first met. She called me Chad. I just wanted a kebab, I said. Tried to make it a joke, but it didn't help us feel better. Let's get you to bed. If you're still sick tomorrow, we'll call the doctor. I knew I'd be sick the next day, and many days after, it was a kind of sickness I had to deal with. Lily, taking care of me, didn't match the image I had of her cheating. Hard to understand. She helped me a lot, like making sure I drank water and had a bowl nearby if I needed to throw up. Sometimes when she was there, she'd put a cool hand on my forehead and rub my back. Her caring was confusing. It made things more complex. I could end this doubt. Ask her if she had lunch with her boss, but I wasn't sure she was even there. Maybe next Friday I could pretend to be sick. Would she stay with me then? Maybe she would, but that wouldn't solve anything in the long run. Being faithful isn't something you can force. It's a choice you make and give to each other freely. I gave my heart to Lily with joy. I always kept her first in my thoughts and feelings. Sadly, I feared she had broken our bond, even without being with him in that way, just by meeting him and hiding it from me. The heart can turn away before anything else happens. The days that followed felt empty. I went to work, maybe making the right calls. If not, some of my clients might be facing bigger tax bills than they hoped for. My mind filled the void with awful images of Lily with another man, in ways I couldn't, so I was pretty sure she wore it today. I remembered her wearing it to work before. Why hide the suit now? I thought that's why she put on the Burberry. I left for work around 4:30. My phone rang. Like always, I just said hello without giving my name, waiting to hear if they asked for Mr. Smith or Mr. Martin. This tells me what the call is about. Mr. Martin. Yes. Speaking. It's Vin. Mr. Martin. My heart raced. Was this good or bad news? What's up? I didn't like asking. Vin's tone was kind as he said, I'm sorry, Mr. Martin. My stomach ached even more. I see. I stayed quiet knowing my marriage was done for. Mr. Martin, I'm here, Vin. Can we meet at your office on Monday? Yes. When? About 11. I'll be there. That Saturday and Sunday felt full of worry. Lily was extra sweet, but I couldn't be the same back. If she was upset by my coldness, she didn't show it. She might have thought I was still sick from last week. We did our normal weekend stuff, shopping on Saturday. Later, I tidied up our little garden. Our house was an old Essex weatherboard one bought before we were married. I checked the weatherboard as usual after winter. Some spots needed fixing and paint. I took my time with this task. It kept me away from Lily's prying eyes, and I was thankful for that. I went back to work on Monday, worried about what was coming. The buzz after eating, the staff left, and Bennington locked the door and poured drinks. They talked for a bit. Then, about 15 minutes later, your wife got on the table and started to take off her clothes. He stopped, looking uneasy. He tried again. She took everything off. He paused again. I'm sorry, Mr. Martin, but I can't say what happened next. There are pictures. You should see them alone. You'll then understand. I'm really sorry. As he talked, I felt a ball of ice form in my chest. It got big and cold, so big I found it hard to breathe and it felt like it was freezing my heart. There were not many words to tell how sad I was. I had lost someone I loved, watching as they put her in the ground. The one gone wouldn't come back to remind me of the hurt. I was sad but also mad. Mad at Lily, but even more mad at Bennington and the other two men. Bennington knew she had a husband but didn't care, treating her badly. I would handle things with Lily first, then go after Bennington and the other two. I cleared my throat. Can we find out where they live or if they're married with those registration numbers? Yes, Mr. Martin. There are always a few cops willing to make extra money. How much? A few hundred should be enough. I nodded as he talked more. Mr. Martin, you're a good man. I'm not cheating you. I'll get the info and you can pay me then. We talked a bit more before he left, but the last thing he told me was, don't do anything silly, Mr. Martin. I said I wouldn't. I went through the DVD. I never liked porn, and a film with my wife in it did nothing for me. I skipped most of it, especially when Lily got up on a table and took off her clothes in a teasing way. I just needed the important parts and to hear the comments. That made me even more mad at the three men. I couldn't watch when they touched her everywhere. I would have felt sick. The sound came and went based on where they were. After their time with my wife, Lily went to a bathroom. I think the one man said to Bennington, "Where'd you get her?" He flashed a grin. "She's something, huh?" Bennington said, proud. Haskins nodded. "She makes my wife seem like a stone." He glanced at Bennington. "Can we do this again? I'll pay for the room." "Sure. Just let me know when you're up for it. She's got a husband, right?" "So?" Bennington smiled. "Yes, but I think he's just a simple number guy, not a big-shot accountant. Bet he can't even satisfy her." They all laughed. I turned off the DVD there. We'll see who laughs last, I thought. But first, I had to talk to Lily. I left for home right after Vin did. Lily usually got home by 5:30, way before me. She'd often start dinner, but this talk wasn't for a cozy kitchen chat. It was afternoon when I got in. I had time to set things up. I left my car at the pub thinking Lily wouldn't expect me home. Silly, really. She couldn't deny it. It was all on the DVD. I paused the video as they got into the room and sat. I called these pictures snaps. I didn't need many. I chose one with Lily on the table, nothing on. Another with Bennington and her, legs wide, and a last one, her on Haskins, another man close by, and Bennington too, maybe doing more. I saved them in a folder I brought from work. That was enough. Vin's friend had more, but I didn't need them. I made tea and sat down to wait. Lily came in at 525. She headed straight to the kitchen to start the kettle, then walked into the back room. We call it the lounge. She froze when she saw me. "Chad, you scared me." "You're home early. Is something wrong? Don't you feel good?" I lifted my hand. "Something is up. And no, I don't feel good." "Then, dear, I'll call the doc. This has gone on too long." "Yes, it has. But a doc can't fix this. Sit, Lily." She looked puzzled, but took a seat in the armchair. I hit the play button on the remote and the screen lit up. I heard her gasp. I let the DVD run a bit. Lily was breathing hard. I looked at her. "See this DVD?" She was trying to breathe, moaning. "No, please, no." She hid her face in her hands, sobbing hard. I paused the DVD and waited for her to calm down. It took a while, as every time she tried to stop crying, she'd look at me, see my cold face, and start crying again. At last, she was out of tears. She couldn't look me in the eye. Her face was red and tear-streaked. She cleared her throat. "Howdy," I cut her off. "It's not about how, it's that I know this DVD is 2.5 hours, so you get what it shows?" "All of it," I yelled. "Everything." She cried again. I gave her time. I made 2 coffees. Caffeine seemed right for this talk. I brought them into the lounge with a warm cloth for Lily. She gave a weak smile of thanks. She took a coffee sip. "I'm so sorry, Chad." I nodded. "Sure you are, but would you be sorry if I hadn't found out?" She didn't answer. I didn't wait for one. "What's next, Chad? I'm not doing anything." "You are." "What do you mean? You're going upstairs to pack." "Tomorrow you leave this house for good. Chad, must I? I love you so much." I opened the folder and picked the picture with her and 3 other guys. I showed it to her. "This is your love for me?" I yelled. She started crying again. I left her to cool off as well. The anger inside me was hot, but I couldn't let it out. I feared I might hurt her if I did. When I came back, she was calm. "Will you divorce me?" she asked, scared. "No, Lily, I won't." She looked hopeful, but then I said, "If you think life with Bennington is what you want, then you must divorce me. I'll use these pictures to protect myself, and you'll likely end up with nothing. Bennington's wife might leave him with nothing too. So I doubt life with him will be great, unless he sells you. You seem good at that." Lily turned pale as I compared her to someone who sells themselves, but didn't fight back. I knew I couldn't use the DVD and photos in court as they were gotten in a bad way. Lily didn't know this. "I wouldn't stay with him. I don't even like him that much." Why then did she go to him? I didn't ask. It would just make her say things that would humiliate me more, like I wasn't enough for her. "Why won't you divorce me?" she asked. "No point. You've turned me off marriage. Divorce would cost me too much. I've worked too hard to risk it all. You go. If you have any self-respect, you'll find a new job and move past what you did. I'll give you a break. You need to get your own bank account from tomorrow. Your cards won't work. I'll give you money every month, and you can keep the car." Lily was puzzled. "Why do this?" "Lily, I have loved you, and I still do. But what you did hurt me a lot. You saw I was sick. It wasn't a bug. It was the shock of knowing what you did. I can't stay with you. Seeing you just makes me think of it, and I get mad. When we got married, I gave you all my love, and I can't pull it back. Still, I can't stand to see you struggle. After all we've been through, let's call it even. But Lily, we can fix this together." She tried. "Yes," I said, but not really meaning it. "It's not we who need to fix things, Lily. It's me. Seeing you with those men made me so sick. My wife, the woman I love, with other men and looking happy. Those pictures are stuck in my head. The only way for me to get past this is to forget it all." Lily was sad, slowly packing up. Every time I saw her, she looked at me, hoping I'd change my mind. I couldn't change. The images stuck in my head made me cold. She called someone named Daphne that night, likely finding a place to stay. I heard her going down the stairs, bangs and all, because of her heavy suitcase. A week ago, I'd have helped. Tonight, I didn't, nor ever would again. She stepped into the room. "I'm leaving now. A friend from work is letting me stay for a bit. I'll leave my job without telling them tomorrow." She waited, maybe hoping I'd ask her to stay. I crushed that hope. I snapped at her, feeling a heavy mix of anger and sadness. "I'm so sorry, Chad, truly sorry. I love you, remember that." She left no room for me to respond. Opening the door, she sobbed louder as she pulled her suitcase out. The door banged shut behind her. The rest of my night was filled with deep sadness. I went to bed way later than usual. Her scent lingered on the bed sheets, and I couldn't stop crying. At least Lily didn't use those empty excuses like "it meant nothing" or "it's not what you think." How can anyone say such things when the truth is right there on the TV? I knew breaking up was right. But God, it hurt so much. Lily hurt me, and I hurt myself. When would this pain end? Being on time and taking care of details had always been my thing, but now I was late to work twice in 1 week. My friend from the newsstand noticed and was so worried he had to check on me. "Mr. Martin, it's not like you to be late. I thought maybe my watch was wrong," he said. "Your watch is fine. I had some stuff to do at home first. Don't worry. Things haven't changed much," I reassured him. He seemed relieved. "I noticed you didn't pick up your paper today. Let me get it for you." He quickly got me the paper, handing it over like it was a treasure. I went to pay him, but he refused. "No charge for you, Mr. Martin." I felt a bit better about people after that. Later, a friend called to check on me. "Just wanted to make sure you're okay, Mr. Martin. Heard about Mrs. Martin. Sorry to hear that." "Thanks. I'm just feeling really down, but I'll get through it," I answered. I agreed with him. He said he'd have the info on those 2 men soon. A friend in the police told him if the cars were tied to a business, he could dig deeper. What's that mean? Easy. He could ask the business in an official way. Since he's a cop, they'd likely tell him who uses those cars and where they live. Then he joked about knowing some shady cops. "Just a couple, Mr. Martin. Just a few who don't stick to their usual hours." I chose to stay and work. This surely puzzled Mr. Shandling again. This task wasn't for my clients. It was for me to look into. I was curious about Mr. Bennington and Ellen Dax and company, where he was the boss. My office had 2 computers. The main one, my workhorse, had no internet. I even took out the part that could connect it. I knew from Frank and others that it's too easy for others to break into a computer. I used the second one for the internet. A visit to the company's house website got me lots of data, like last year's money details. These were short forms, but still told a lot if you know what you're looking at. After a quick look, I checked the emergency fund. Any solid business has one. It's basically their secret stash. In good times, you add extra here. It cuts the net gain and stays out of dividend talks. It's also not counted for tax in bad times. You dip into the emergency fund to keep profits looking good enough to share dividends. It's also there for a fast cash need. Lots of accountants say this emergency fund shows if a business is doing well. Even though Elwyn, Dax, and company said they made a bit of money each year, their emergency fund was almost empty. That was odd. I guess they either used this fund to make their profits look better and now it was gone, or it was never big to start with. So I went to check the Dun & Bradstreet website. You need to sign up to get in, and accountants like me always do. Their reports make it clear they're just giving their take based on what info they have, not a final word on if a company is doing well or not. But what they said about Alwyn Dax and company didn't look good. I knew I had to dig deeper, but that meant a trip to the company's house. What I needed wasn't online. I went there the next day, and coming back to my office by late morning felt good for the first time in weeks. I was set on catching Bennington out, and it seemed he was making it easy for me. I guess once someone's bad, they stay that way. And Bennington really was bad. I found some interesting bits of info. They didn't prove anything wrong was going on, but it sure looked like it might be. I left a message for Vin. I had another task for him. He called back that afternoon. "Can I help with something, Mr. Martin?" "Yes, Vin. Can you go to Chelmsford and keep an eye on the company where my wife works?" "What am I to watch for?" he asked. "I need you to write down the license plates of their trucks. They have about 25 and they travel all over, so getting all of them might be hard. But if you can get a good number, that should work." "I can do that. 2 or 3 days should be enough," Vin said. "That's what I thought. Do you need to find out who owns them?" Vin was quick. "You're ahead of me. Yes, that's exactly what I want. Leave it with me, Mr. Martin. I'll get back to you in 3 or 4 days." My doubts got big because the trucks were getting old. The papers matched what the tax folks wanted. But there was no talk of buying new trucks in the money records. Then, the same high cost for fixing trucks showed up year after year. Those trucks aren't cheap, and fixing costs climb as they get older. It looked like no new trucks were bought and they were stuck with old ones, but the fix costs didn't change. I knew something was off, and that something was Bennington. Back to my usual days, sort of, but those nights were heavy with sadness. We always had someone to clean the house 2 times a week. So, Lily's scent faded fast, yet so much still brought her back to me. I'd see a photo on the wall we picked together and my heart would ache. The sheets on my bed, clean and neat, were ones Lily liked and got for us. I'd see them and remember us close, in love, in those deeply personal moments shared by 2. But then, anger would hit, blaming her and Bennington for breaking something so good. then feeling bad for being mad at Lily. I loved her, a heavy weight I'd carry forever. Then the break came, a list of truck numbers. There were 18, and the big news, they were all rented. Bennington and his shady helper, who must have known, were writing off costs for trucks they didn't own. What else were they hiding? I bet there was more, but I had no time to dig. This was enough. Fake money moves deserving time behind bars. But here was the snag. I thought about telling the tax office, but dealing with them is always a hassle. They're quick to doubt and might start poking around in my business, wondering why I'm snooping on a company I've got no ties to. Would they then turn their gaze onto me? Sure, my records are clean, but they might just stumble upon something by chance. Then something new came up. My wife had left her job at that company, Mr. Martin. Did that make me happy? I wasn't sure. What I really needed was solid proof that the leasing company actually owned those trucks. So I pretended to be an external auditor in a letter, claiming I'd accidentally shredded their contract copy. Asking Elwyn Dax directly again would be too awkward. 2 weeks later, I had the document, listing all the trucks under the contract. I dug deep for info on this company, scanning many online resources until I pieced it all together. Founded in 1897, it started by transporting milled grain from Essex's countryside to London's bakeries, enjoying modest success post, World War I. The company jumped at the chance to buy up surplus army trucks, branching out into package delivery. The grain side of things dwindled over time, shifting their focus to hauling and storage. Its business structure remained unchanged, now mostly owned by Elwyn Dax's descendants. What once was wholly owned by 3 siblings had spread to 22 family members, each holding less than 10% of shares, except for 2 who had just over 30% and were also company directors. A plan began to form in my mind, questioning the capabilities of these 2 directors. One was a retired lieutenant general called Air Stanley, and the other was Mrs. TBE Dax. Bennington and the Jam Chambers, who kept track of all the important papers, helped run the show. Did the General and Mrs. Dax know they were on the hook for making sure the company's money reports sent to the tax folks and the business registry were on the up and up? I didn't think so. Did they also get that having something that made them look richer on paper but wasn't real meant they were in deep trouble? They could be accused of keeping the business alive when it was actually out of cash. That's breaking the law. What was I going to do with what I knew? I decided to chat with Frank because I saw a chance for him to snatch up a business that could bring in good money without much cost. At first, Frank wasn't sure. All this trouble just to get back at someone? I could simply send a couple of guys to rough him up. Straight to the point. Yeah, Frank, but if they don't take him down for good, he's just going to get back up. He'll still have his fancy life and power. And you know, beating someone up is pretty illegal, I pointed out. My plan was going to wipe him out money-wise for good. He could end up in jail too, and what I'm doing is by the book, I added. Frank let out a breath. Okay, Jess, I'm in, but what's the price? Just need your name. I'll handle it. Just don't want my name on any paperwork that could tip off Bennington. In the end, you'll have a solid business bringing in good cash. Damn, Jess, you were going to make me go legit. I can see it now. Frank Weston, respected by all. My dad would not believe it. I had the same chat with Jack Hallam, another client who lived like Frank. Frank knew I'd talked to Jack and was cool with it. Jack was cool too. After hearing everything, he offered the same help as Frank. But I convinced him my way was the way to go. I'd only do this for you, Jess. You've always been fair with me. Your advice never fails. Count me in. I wanted a new name because I didn't want to buy so many shares under one name and tip off the big players. The folks in charge of keeping track of who owns shares gave me their addresses, and I sent letters to all the smaller shareholders. I told them someone I knew wanted to buy their shares at a price that would really catch their eye. They were really into it. They always got some money back from their shares, but not as much as they hoped. The thought of getting a few £1,000s for shares they didn't think much of was too good to pass up. Not everyone sold, but enough did to give me some power at the next shareholders meeting. I was going to speak for Frank and Jack there. The meeting was set for March, a few months away, mainly to go over the finances and decide on the share of profits to give out. From talking to those willing to sell, it seemed like few of them ever showed up to these meetings. They got their shares from family and weren't really into investing, so they didn't care much about what happened there. So when I walked into the meeting on the day, seeing only Mrs. Dax, Lieutenant General Stanley Bennington and Chambers there didn't shock me. They looked up, a bit surprised as I came in. I showed them the letters Frank and Jack had given me to speak for them. Chambers looked them over and then said, "Welcome, Mr. Martin." Right then, Bennington looked like he just couldn't believe it. He must have been thinking hard about letting Martin in. Stanley got us started. They handed out the financial details for us to look at. Mrs. Dax and the General didn't really dive into them. I guess they weren't used to dealing with business stuff. I, on the other hand, looked them over closely. That wasn't what they were used to here. Chambers and Bennington looked a bit nervous. "Is there something you're stuck on, Mr. Martin?" Chambers asked. "No, not at all. Why am I keeping you waiting? Not at all. If there's a problem, maybe I can help explain." Chambers came back. "I'm sorry." I gave a small smile. This next part was going to be fun. I took out my card and slid it over to him. "As you can see, I'm as skilled as you. We accountants always check, right?" Chambers didn't look pleased. He passed my card to Bennington. He looked like he'd swallowed a bug. Stanley was ready with his pen, about to sign. I glanced over at him. "Lieutenant General, I wouldn't sign that if I were you. It'd be breaking the law." "What? What do you mean? I'm sorry to tell you this, but these accounts are wrong. They're not truthful." The General glared at me. "Mr. Martin, you better be ready to back that claim up." "We're wasting time here," Bennington said loudly. "We have other things to talk about." I ignored him and replied to the General. "Of course, sir. Could you please find the part about vehicle upkeep and value going down?" He found it. "Yes, looks all good to me. It would, General, if we really owned the vehicles. Of course we do. Had the fleet for years." I shook my head. "No, sir." I opened the folder and took out a leasing agreement, slid it over to him. "Have a look at this agreement?" Then I brought out the list of vehicles under this agreement, slid it over too. "That's the list of vehicles. I believe you'll see it matches up." He read the agreement and then the list, passed them to Mrs. Dax so she could see the names Bennington and Chambers signed for the company. Those two must have felt very uncomfortable. Their faces turned red. The General had seen enough. "Bennington, it seems you have some explaining to do. Let's go to your office and you can tell me what's happening. I didn't want that. The top guy probably didn't get the money stuff, and Bennington thought he could trick him with fancy talk." "General, listen up," I caught his ear. "This scam's been running for ages. This year's money story just doesn't add up. Without this key piece, our company's pretty much broke. That's against the law. I said we need to stop all business now and get an outside check done." "No way!" Bennington yelled, him and Chambers looking real sour. "Silence!" The General boomed like he was back on the field. He thought it over, then leaned in to chat with Mrs. Dax. She agreed, then looked my way. "Mr. Martin, could the General and I get in big trouble?" I nodded. "Yep, it looks like it." "Then I guess we're for your idea," the General decided. "I'm in," said Mrs. Dax. Chambers had to write it down, then called for a vote. The General, Mrs. Dax, and me, all hands went up. With over 30% of the shares between them, and my 22% in proxy votes, it was an easy win. Leaving the meeting, I ran into Bennington. He glared at me. "Snake?" I said right back. "Takes one to spot one." I warned him not to underestimate the little accountants. Some have real power. Now he knew who I was was sure the audit would bring up more dirt on him. "How's it feel to be on the edge knowing you're about to fall?" 4 weeks later, the outside check was done. As an owner, Frank came to show me the report. "I can't make heads or tails of this." "What's it say?" he asked, looking around my place with a screw face. "Why don't you move to somewhere nicer?" he said. I overlooked the diss for a moment. The report confirmed all I thought. Bennington was deep in scams, cheating both his investors and the tax office with fake accounts. The tax people, after getting a heads up from the auditors, began their slow but sure investigation. They missed nothing, and soon they'd tear Bennington and Chambers apart. The cops were now on it too. Bennington had put me through hell, and now it was his turn. I shared the report findings with Frank and explained what this meant for Bennington. He winced. "Looks like he'll be meeting some tough folks soon," he laughed. Then I answered his next question. Frank, I stay here because it works for me. If I moved to a nicer place, it'd draw attention. Even the tax man might start snooping around, and that's the last thing we want. Having the taxman on our case is bad news, so here I stay. They think I'm just a simple accountant, not someone full of tricks to dodge taxes. That works for me, I added with a grin. Thought so, Frank said. Now, what's next for this mess of a company you've exposed? It's not a total loss. It's still a good business. The shareholders will probably sell their shares cheap. And if you're interested, Jack, taking over won't cost much. It'd be a profitable business sending trucks across the country, maybe even overseas, I hinted, watching his reaction. He seemed intrigued. That could be interesting, Frank muttered, then left lost in thought. I decided to pile on Bennington's troubles. I had Vin deliver envelopes with DVD copies and screen grabs directly to Bennington's and his partners' places, just sliding them through the mail slots. The lawyers would thank me for all the business heading their way. A few weeks later, the general called. Mr. Martin, my cousin, thank you, Dax. Looks like we need to pay a fine, but it won't be too bad. It seems the tax folks are mostly mad at Bennington and Chambers. We need advice on what to do with the company. Honestly, we don't want to keep it. Maybe General Stanley could convince my friends, Mr. Weston and Mr. Hallam, to take over. Because of the bad talk, they'll need to put in extra money to help it recover. If you can talk to them, let's see what they say. The company's shares are really low now, so we'll take any fair offer. Vin was a big help. He always knew what was going on. After a few months, he visited us at the office. This time, he took our coffee offer. He showed us 2 newspapers. The first one, the Chelmsford Weekly News, had a story on the front page about trouble at the local business, Dax Lieutenant, and a tax investigation. There was also a bit about Mrs. Ida Bennington divorcing her husband, Walter, with pictures of him with another woman. The other paper, the South End Standard, talked about 2 managers, Mr. Darby Haskins and Mr. Marlowe, who lost their jobs at a local company for bad behavior and for making the company look bad. They also had trouble at home with their wives. I thanked Vin for bringing this info. I wanted payback, and while I was working on it, I felt excited. But now, I didn't feel much at all. It's been a year since Lily left. I've been busy with my regular job and these side projects. I hadn't taken the time to think about where I was heading or what I'd do next. Things used to be clear. I'd work until my money from other places was enough, then retire. Move to a warm place with Lily for a calm and cozy life. But Bennington and his friends ruined that plan. The thought of finding another woman to share my life? Not easy. Once bitten, twice shy, as they say. Any woman with me would face doubt. Watching her every move would kill trust, leading to fights and distrust. Without my dreams, I dived into the detailed world of accounting. The general called me one day. Frank and Jack didn't want the shares. Looks like we're stuck with them, he said. Then he added, Mr. Martin, you said the company could work well if handled right. I had said that, yes. How about you run it for us? I'd give you some shares as a push. And a good pay, too. General, I'm thankful for your offer. But let me say, accountants aren't meant to run companies. You need someone who takes risks, full of ideas. Accountants, well, we're not that. Just look at big failures here run by accountants. He got my point. Even the Army's run by accountants now, he said, not happy. Then he asked if I could meet for lunch next Tuesday. He and his cousin, Mrs. Dax, wanted to thank me. I live near Chelmsford, so it worked. He's not used to hearing no, so I said yes. He gave me his address near Danbury, saying 12 to 12:30 would work fine. I drove to Danbury feeling pretty good. It had been a year since I had to ask Lily to move out. In all that time, I hadn't gone out to have fun. Not even once. I liked the general a lot. He felt like someone from an older time, but he was easy to talk to. He didn't have to ask an old soldier about being one, he was. I bet he had lots of cool stories. His house wasn't what I pictured. I thought it would be big and fancy with a huge yard, but it was a simple, small house with a very nice, tidy garden. He met me at the door. Mr. Martin, thanks for coming over. It's nice to see you, General Ambrose said. Call me Chad, he added. It's short for Charles, I guessed. He led me inside where Mrs. Dax stood to greet me. Call me Terry, she said. Her real name was Teresa, but she'd been Terry all her life. Ambrose got us drinks and we sat to chat. Speaking for both of us, you've really helped us out, he started. These shares came to me by inheritance. The Army doesn't really teach you about running a business, and I don't know the first thing about it. Terry's husband was the last Dax to really dive into the business side of things. When he passed, Bennington seemed like a lifeline. We wouldn't have caught on to what he was up to until it was too late. That would have cost us big time, not just in fees to the tax folks. Thank you. I just made some polite sounds during lunch. The talk was fun and light until coffee, when Ambrose suddenly asked me a tough question. Why did you get involved with our company? I tried to keep it vague, saying something about my bosses always looking for a chance to invest. He didn't buy it. This wouldn't have to do with Bennington mainly, would it, Chad? Or maybe because a young lady with the same last name as yours left suddenly. I gave up, like a soldier waving the white flag. Okay, you got me, I said, and he smiled. Is she your old lady? Terry Dax joined the Inquisition. I nodded yes. But you're not together now? No, I said, feeling sad. Ambrose looked at me, feeling bad for me. It won't make you feel better, but she was not the only one. Bennington had his hands full in that area. You knew I was upset? No. The cops asked the people who worked there, and it seems some knew what he was doing. The cops also found a bottle of liquid in his desk. When they tested it, it was one of those bad drugs people slip into a girl's drink. Terry Dax came to me and put a kind hand on my arm. That knowledge might help. She was not in her right mind. I shook my head. She was fine when she went to lunch with him, every time. I don't think his drugging her changed anything. She shouldn't have been there at all. My words made the talk go quiet. Ambrose changed the subject. You live close to Chelmsford, right? I was glad for the new topic. Yes, I live in Abbott's Roding. How nice, Terry said. The area thinks are lovely villages. We then talked about the nice things about living in English villages. I was thinking it was time to go and said I should leave. Then the general said something smart about Mr. Weston being hard to work with. We asked for a fair price for the shares, but he offered so low it was like giving them away. I think he's kind of sneaky. I smiled. You might be right, Ambrose. He's from the East, like me. I think he plays tricks. Ambrose smiled. I think that's called not being fully honest. Whatever. We had many like that in the Army, always in trouble for something. But tough soldiers all the same, the ones you'd want with you when things got tough. Driving home, I mulled over what Ambrose had spilled. Bennington, it turns out, was a heartbreaker, with Lily just one of his many catches. It didn't sway my choice. If his flirtations were known around the office, then Lily should have been on alert. She kept saying yes to his lunch invites for weeks. She must have known what he was after, yet she kept going. To me, that spelled out she was okay with it. Learning that Bennington got jailed for 2 years felt hollow. He'd be in a minimum security place since he wasn't seen as a threat. Well, not a danger to everyone, but to married women. That's another tale. What did lift my spirits was hearing his wife took him for all he was worth in the divorce. When he got out, he'd be without a home, likely broke, and unable to snag a job like before, then couldn't dig up anything on Haskins and Wello from the brief news article. No, I wasn't okay. I had lost the one who brightened my world, and they were to blame. But life wasn't done tossing curveballs my way. The General and Mrs. Dax kept in touch. We weren't tight, but kept a friendly vibe. Elwyn Dax, Lieutenant, was back in business after the probe. The tax folks decided not to shut us down, but said we needed strong leadership. I joined them today to pick someone for Bennington's old job. One guy stood out to me, though both were decent picks. After they left, we sat with teas, talking it over. We all liked the resume of the guy I singled out and agreed to offer him the job. I mentioned that it would cost a pretty penny in salary and bonuses to bring him on board. I agree he's the top pick, but I doubt he'd join us for the pay we can give. Our company is deep in debt. We need to save money until we've cut down that debt. Maybe we should go with Mr. Snedden. I think he'll do well and we can afford him. Chad, you're thinking like an accountant, joked Ambrose. That's why you wanted me here, right? I smiled, and so did he. Terry Dax made the call. I think we should listen to Chad. He's given us solid advice before, and we should take his advice now. Ambrose nodded, agreed. Then Terry Dax switched gears. Chad, have you thought about your wife at all? No, you should. You know, I think she's just as much caught in this mess as you were. Why do you think that, Terry? From what you've said and what the investigation found, Bennington was good at tricking people. He was her boss, and as an employee, she'd likely do what he said. No one talked about what he did until the cops got involved, so it wasn't widely known. I doubt she knew his true plans, and I'm sure he told her a convincing story. Then if he drugged her. Well, I'd think a lot of girls would be fooled. For months, I thought Lily knew what she was doing. I held on to that idea. But Terry suggested a story that made sense. Lily was never one to just do as told, but she took her job seriously and would do exactly as her boss said if she didn't suspect anything wrong. I doubt she'd question him. And then it was too late, with Terry's words in mind. I drove off and turned left. If I were to ask Lily back, would she do that again? I felt, no, she wouldn't. There was a grocery store just down the road, and on impulse decided to stop in and grab a few things. I really needed laundry detergent. My cleaner, Mrs. Selby, took over the laundry chores after my mishap. I had no washing powder or clean shirts left, so I washed a load with dish soap instead. Big mistake. I had to run the wash 3 times to get rid of the foam. Even then, my shirts smelled like soap for days. Mrs. Selby saw things differently. She thought the powder slot should always be full. I didn't get why she kept adding laundry powder to my shopping list almost every 2 weeks, until one day I was home when she did the laundry. In a polite way, I showed her the little scoop that came with the powder, pointing out what the maker suggested. After that, I only had to buy laundry powder every 6 weeks. Picking up a basket, I went to the grocery store. I was surprised to see Lily at the checkout. Or at least I thought it was Lily, even though she wore a hat with a veil over her face. Were those strange events trying to send me a message again? I rushed through my shopping and went to the checkout she had used. Of course, she was gone by then. I talked with the checkout girl, the lady with the veil. I think I knew her. Yes, Mrs. Martin. She lives just around the corner. Visits daily. Why the veil? Maybe she has a skin problem. I'm not really sure. I've been here only a few weeks. You don't know the address? No, I know it's Hathaway Road, but that's all. I left feeling unsure. It was one of those mind versus heart battles. No, my mind said, she's out of your life. Remember what she did. But then the part of my mind that makes decisions stepped in. What skin problem? Lily didn't have that when she was with me. Her skin was always clear. Then my heart leaned into curiosity, repeating Terry Dax's words. I found Hathaway Road. It was one of those long streets close to the town center. Rows of old homes built long ago stood side by side, meant for skilled workers from before the big war. Now their front windows and sharp roofs stuck out, once loved and just right for families. They've been chopped into smaller homes now. The city gives out big trash bins, but with homes so close, these bins crowd the front yards. Those who built these homes didn't think we'd all have cars one day, so no space for them was made. Cars line the street, some looking like they've not moved in ages, covered in dirt and left behind trash. I found a spot to park. Going up to the closest door, I knocked. After a bit, a woman peeked out, the door barely open. Hi, sorry to bother you. I'm looking for a Mrs. Martin. Know which home she's in? No. The door started to close, but I quickly said, she wears a hat and veil. The door cracked open a bit more. I've seen her walking that way, she pointed down the street. Thanks. The door shut before I finished. Back in the car, I wondered whether to drive on or keep my spot. I decided to move, hoping for the best. Not far, I looked for another spot to park. Luck was on my side, although the space was littered with broken glass. No other spots in sight, so I parked and tried another door. No answer. So next door I went. This time, a door opened. A man looked at me, not too pleased. I shared why I was there. Mentioning the lady with a veil made him soften a bit. I didn't know her name, but she lived right over there at 316. I guess it was the ground floor one. I said thanks and crossed the street to find 316. Once, the front garden wall must have been knocked down, maybe to make room for cars. Now it was just for the bins. There were 2 doorbells. One said top flat. The other had no label, so I guessed it was for the ground floor. I rang it. My tummy felt all weird. Why was I so jittery? The door swung open and there we were, looking at each other. She had on a hat with a veil. It felt like ages before she spoke. Well, if it isn't you, blown in by the wind, hi Lily, that's right, kick me out, then show up at my door after months, she said. I just said hi. Well, you might as well come in, she said, kind of nice, then walked away. I went in, letting the door shut. Her door was the first right, open for me. The place had some old furniture, not much. A chair, a tiny table, and an electric heater where a fireplace once was. There was a TV on a low table facing the window. I looked around then at her as she took off her hat and veil. I was shocked. My God, what happened to you? Her face was ruined. It looked like a plastic face that had melted. Big red marks covered her forehead and the left side of her face. Her lips were almost gone. Her look was tough. Came to see your work, Chad? Take a good look. You only need to see it once. I'll see it every day for the rest of my life. Her voice was full of rage. Lily, what happened? I asked, pretending not to know. She mocked me. This is what happens when acid hits your face. Did you think it would end up like this? What do you mean? When you said as if I didn't know. The hard look in their eyes eased a bit. Don't play dumb. You know well what I mean, Lily. I've got no clue. Now she seemed unsure. The man who did this said it was for payback. I guess I thought it was you who ordered it. I sadly shook my head. How long were we a thing, Lily? 6 years. 3 months and 17 days. She knew it so fast and sure it surprised me. In all that time, didn't you get who I am? 6 years, 3 months, and was it? 17 days? Do you really think I would do or have done to you something so mean and full of hate? Is that the person you saw in me? Tears fell from eyes that couldn't close right. She shook her head. No, I couldn't. But only one other person would hate me like you did. And who's that other, Lily? It was me, she cried. Me. It was me, she cried. Me. The tears were real. No, Lily, I didn't hate you. I hated what you did, but not you. Never you. She cried hard. Her whole body shook. I reached in my pocket for a clean handkerchief I grabbed this morning. I gave it to her, and she cried harder as she took it. 10 minutes, maybe 15. I don't know. She pulled herself together. She gave back the handkerchief. Why did you come here, Chad? You know, it just brings back all the pain. I saw you at the store. I wasn't sure it was you, but the cashier said you were Mrs. Martin. And she said you lived on Hathaway Road, so I thought I'd check if it was really you and if you were okay. She looked at me with calm eyes, and I shook my head. No, Lily. Really, I don't know why I came. Part of me said no, don't bring up old stuff. The other part said, go see her. Even as I stepped off the curb and pushed the doorbell, doubts twisted in my gut. She looked at me. Yes, Chad, that seems right. Sorry for crying. Want some tea? I needed it. I'm as dry as a desert. Will she start the kettle? Come in, Chad. That's if you can look at me. She led me to her kitchen at the back. Thanks for the money you send. It's a big help now since finding work is hard. They see my face and turn away. She went on. I sold the car. Couldn't keep up with the costs. Needed the cash. I got that. As the kettle heated, she rubbed cream on her face. Did a doctor tell you to use that? She shook her head, mumbling. Didn't catch that. What? She faced me, standing strong. I didn't go to the hospital, she said. I lost it. Jesus, Lily, why? Tears mixed with the cream on her face. I thought it was you. I was so sure you had done it. If I went to the hospital, cops would come for you. She didn't want to cause me more trouble. Her words left me speechless. She bore her scars thinking they would keep me safe. I was shocked and moved. Lily, even if you thought it was me, you needed help. Whoever did this should face justice. The police could have helped. It wasn't me, Lily. I couldn't hurt you. She searched my face, looking for truth, then slowly nodded. It was a Monday, and I was getting ready for work when someone rang the doorbell. I answered it. There stood a thin, tall man. He asked if I was Mrs. Martin. I said yes. Then he said, "This is revenge." I remember seeing a glass bottle in his hand before he swung it, splashing something cold on my face, then a burning feeling and a bad smell. I guessed it was acid. He ran off right after. By instinct, I might have closed my eyes. I tried to find a cloth, but then remembered something about water and acid. So I went into the bathroom and got under the shower, cold water running. I think I was there for about an hour, all wet from head to toe. I was freezing, but my face felt like it was on fire. When I looked in the mirror, I saw my face all red and swollen. I knew then I'd never look the same. Recalling all this made her cry again. There wasn't much I could do but hold her. She used my handkerchief to wipe away more tears. My head was spinning. Then it hit me. What about Bennington? Bennington did it. How do you figure? Can we sit? I need to tell you something. She had me sit in the only comfy chair and pulled up a dining chair for herself. As I shared the entire mess about Bennington, Haskins, and Wello, my revenge, I realized Lily was right and wrong in her first guess. Because of me, she had been hurt in this awful way. What I did had wrecked Bennington. He might end up in jail, and I had to tell him it was your husband who did this. He needed to know. Maybe he chose to fight back, and you got hurt. Lily, I'm so sorry. I didn't think it would hurt you. I don't see it like that, Chad. I'm glad you got back at him. If it was Bennington, then what happened to me was just an accident. You seemed to take it easy. Lily smiled, but it was sad. It doesn't matter now. She pointed at her face. This happened, and nothing can fix it. I realized a while ago she was ready to face all this hurt alone just to save me from what she thought was jail and punishment. What she did says a lot. She's paid enough now. In my eyes, more than anyone could ever ask, she took on scars to keep me from jail. I owe Lily big. Carefully, I asked, Lily, will you come back home? Call it kindness, feeling sorry, guilt, whatever. I told you I couldn't stop loving you, and I haven't. I wanted you to hurt like I did. I wanted you to feel my pain, but I never would have wanted you to go through what you did. We will see a doctor to see if anything can be done. But please, Lily, come home with me. I want to take care of you. She shook her head. No, Chad, I can't do that. She put up her hand to stop me. Let me say this now. Chad, I loved you then, and I love you now. I'd be so happy to think we could be as before, but we can't. I hurt you so much. Not on purpose. Still, I broke something. I can't just come back like nothing happened. You would still see my face and remember why it's like that. Then you'd get mad again. We need to talk about that. We both have to get it. I have talked with Mrs. Dax, couldn't hide her shock. Yep, it seems so. Now she and Lieutenant General Stanley see me as some sort of business guru. I got in between their deal to get Bennington out. And now, they tell me things. What did she spill? Turns out, Bennington had a thing for charming lots of folks. You, Lily, were just one on a long list. Only after he was pushed out did folks start talking. I bet he had a way with words, spinning tales that caught you. He did. He asked me out to lunch, claimed it was a normal thing he did with employees. He said the company was in a bind. I thought it odd he shared that. He then said there was this big client that could save us, bring in steady work for months, maybe years. If he could snag their deal, then he wouldn't need to cut jobs. He said I could help him make it happen. I wanted to pitch in. The only weird thing was, he'd always have us take my car. That makes sense. He'd make you feel special, needed, then make it seem like if things went south, you'd be to blame for others losing their jobs. Regarding the car, I guess his flashy Jag was too known around town. Driving around with a young lady would surely stir talk. When you put it like that, yeah, it clicks. She looked at me, checking if clicks was the right word, something she'd do now and then when we chatted at home. That small move really got to me. So tell me, Chad, seems like you know the drill. Are you one to chase after many? She had a soft smile, the kind that used to light up my day, the smile that meant everything to me. No, Lily. The only one I ever wanted to win over was you. You act like you've got him figured out. She shook her head. You were the only one I wanted to charm me, she said with a sad smile. But to answer you, no, I didn't see it coming. He told me he was having lunch with these two guys from a company and asked if I could help by making drinks and being nice. That's what someone at the front desk does. It was my job, but it was in a hotel, not our office. I still wonder if he planned what happened next. I've spent months thinking and still can't figure out why I went along with it. I needed to ask her about the tough part on the DVD. She seemed okay with how things turned out. I hate to ask, but did you enjoy that lunch? I think I did. The chat with Mr. Haskins and Mr. Wello was good, even though I didn't get much of it. It seemed like we were going to win the deal. I was happy, very happy, and maybe a bit flirty. They were very sweet, always saying nice things, like my smile made their day. Ladies like that. I don't know why I started taking my clothes off. I guess it was to show I liked their company, to make them happy. I didn't think they'd see it as me saying yes to more. How silly, right? Girls know guys get excited when they see that. But it didn't hit me then. I never thought about it. I'm sure he planned it all. I've heard he used drugs before. Maybe he put something in your drink. That's why you felt so happy and didn't think straight." Lily shook her head. "No, Chad. I was making the drinks. That's why I was there. Not for all of them, Lily, just after we ate. He made those drinks." "I don't think so, Chad. It's on the DVD, Lily. He made the drinks that time. Are you sure?" "Totally. I don't remember that." Seeing all the chances clearly made her see and get it all at once. The shock hit her. She yelled out loud. In all the time I've known Lily, she never used bad words. I had to make sure if it was true she went to a room with him some other time. Was that the only time? I think so. But I heard from one of the girls that he had planned to get a room a couple of weeks before. I couldn't make it because I was covering for one of the secretaries who felt sick that day. Oh, I wish someone else had been sick that Friday. Lily's way of telling me made me sure she was speaking the truth. She got very emotional telling the story again and cried. I wanted to make her feel better. She cursed and called Bennington every bad name out there. I stayed quiet seeing how deep his trickery went. Back home, she suddenly hugged me. Chad, I am so sorry. I quickly took out my hanky to wipe her tears. I lifted her chin and kissed her. Her lips were just a shadow of what they once were. Yet I kissed her. Lily was stunned. How can you do that? I am ugly and hurt. You are still the Lily I fell in love with. Yes, you were lovely. But I fell for who you were, not your looks. You are still that person. That person is lovely, and I still love that person. Tears kept falling, but now she was smiling. Can I change my mind? Can I come back home, please, Chad? I want you to come back. Lily didn't take all her clothes when I had her leave, and her closet was as she left it. Her face lit up as she touched the dresses and suits. One dress and one suit. She tossed them on the floor, mad. Get rid of those. I wanted to toss them, but opening Lily's closet felt like opening a box full of sadness. She put her makeup back in the bathroom, saying as she did, I might not use these, but it's nice to see them again. She stopped as she came out. Chad, should I sleep in the other room? She asked. No, I don't want that, I said strongly. I want you back in our bed next to me. This isn't a halfway thing. We'll get through this together or not at all. But I'm thinking we will. And about your makeup, I'm happy it's back. I've missed it these past months. We'll look for a good doctor too, so maybe you'll use that makeup again soon. Abby's didn't have any place to grab quick food, not even a fish and chip shop, which you find everywhere in Britain. It was late when I got Lily home, so I drove to the pub and asked Bernard, the owner, if we could have 2 meals to go. I had eaten there alone many times when Lily was away, and he was glad to help. We sat down to eat together for the first time in 18 months. She was very moved, but we had a good time. Lily cleaned the dishes, her hands in the warm, soapy water, humming. She dried them and put them back in the bag Bernard had given us. She walked around the house, touching things, getting used to being back. I felt good seeing her do this, knowing it was right to ask her back. Getting ready for bed, we both dragged our feet, doing small tasks, not ready for the night, worried that we had lost our spark during the time apart. But when we finally went to bed, I turned towards Lily and she came into my arms as if no time had passed. The high emotions of the day made us both tired, and making love wasn't the first thing on our minds. Holding Lily close and being held tight was how we found each other again. Pulling Lily into a hug as we cuddled in our warm bed was one of the best moments in my life. It was happiness, peace, and joy all mixed into one. Lily let out a deep breath. 6 hours ago, I thought I'd never be in my husband's arms again, but here I am, and here he is, and he's hugging me like before. In just 6 hours, my whole life flipped. Thank you, Chad. Thanks for being brave enough to forgive me. Thanks for loving me enough to look past my scars. And thanks for being you, my rock and support. I leaned in to kiss her gently. Tears were sliding down her face. I wiped them away. They're tears of joy. Chad, my sweet. For a few days, finding joy was put aside as Lily and I got back to normal life. I changed a few things around the house, moved some decor, and took down some photos that were too hard for me to see every day, slow and careful. Lily found them. She didn't put them back. She found a new spot without saying anything. She showed me that our old life was behind us and we were building a new one together, and she was a part of that. We stayed away from the village. Even with her hat and veil, she was shy because of the marks on her face. When I finally went back to work, there was a lot waiting for me. Frank had called many times, so I called him back first. At first, he was sharp, upset I wasn't there when he needed me. Then he softened. "I hear Lily's back with you." I should have known. He knew things, Frank did, about people he found useful. "Yes." "So you do have a heart?" "Yes, Good to hear. Welcome back to life. I heard about her accident. I wouldn't call it an accident. Why? What happened?" I couldn't help but feel a bit smug inside. Frank Information Conduit wasn't as sharp as he believed. Someone threw acid at her face. Damn. We were quiet for a bit. Frank had seen the photo of Lily in my office and often said he didn't get how I landed a lady as pretty as her. "Who did it?" he finally asked. "I don't know. All she said was the guy was tall and thin. I have a guess who might have wanted it done. The thin guy? That'd be Harry. Splash is the only vile jerk who'd do that. I'll talk to him and see. When you do, tell me. No, Jess, your way won't cut it now. You'd cringe at the kind of payback this calls for. Faces. It's like saying you're with me, and I need to keep respect. Can't let people think they can hurt my friends and walk free." Frank never brought it up again. I knew he wouldn't forget, though. Having Lily back felt normal again soon. I suggested she drive me to the station in the morning and pick me up later. I wanted her to use the car during the day, but besides shopping, she hardly went out. Mrs. Selby only came once a week now, since Lily said she'd handle the chores. I bet Mrs. Selby was shocked to see Lily back, but happy, I think. She loved to chat and would share all the town's news, but I don't think she ever mentioned Lily's face. Still, in a small place like ours, word gets around. Lily didn't hide, but slowly started to go out more, even to the town shop, without her veil. When asked, she said it was a kitchen oil accident. We had bonded again deeply. One amazing night. When it happened unplanned, we shared love, holding each other close, wet with sweat after feeling great joy together. I thought one or both of us might feel held back because of what happened, but no, there was only love between us. Lily liked to talk after being close, and actually, she liked to talk anytime. As we lay there getting back to normal, I expected her to say something. Surprisingly, she was quiet. Joking, I asked if she couldn't talk. No talk. It's that I have no words. This was like the first time in Tenerife. Do you remember? I had no words then. How could I forget? You came to me and gave me not just your body, but you, the most special gift I'd ever received. She held me tighter. It was her way of saying she loved the words. You gave me you to talk. I couldn't believe someone could make me so happy, but you did. Tonight felt like another first night. In a way, it was, Lily. We picked a doctor named James Waterman. He worked in Harley Street and was going to cost a lot, but he was honest. He could fix Lily's skin and make her eyelids and lips better, but he said he couldn't make her face like before. He asked why Lily hadn't gone to the hospital. I said we were apart then. It happened, and Lily wrongly thought I did it, so she didn't get help to keep me out of trouble. He was amazed. Your wife loves you a lot, Martin. Lily said, I do, Mr. Waterman. In the car, we talked about the doctor's visit. I was sad, but Lily saw the good side. Chad, if he can't make me look like before, it's still good. I can look in the mirror, see myself, and remember why I look this way. My face will remind me every day not to trust smooth talkers again. I'm yours. She paused before she added more. It would be nice to shut my eyes all the way, though they keep leaking. I got her point, but I was sad she couldn't stay the same Lily I once knew. The beauty fix took about 3 months. Lily was happy with how it turned out, but the first time she saw her face in the mirror, the bruises scared her. She had to stay in the hospital 3 times, each for a week, to get better. There were a few small marks, but Mr. Waterman did a good job hiding them under her chin and in the creases near her eyes. The best part for Lily was she could blink fully again. No eyelashes, but she didn't mind. Fake ones worked fine. She was happy to have her lips back, too, always asking for kisses. I liked giving them. It was a big change for the better, but Mr. Waterman was honest with us. Lily's face still looked a bit off, like it had been through something rough. She'd have to live with that. Other than me being an accountant, Lily didn't know much about my work or how my clients got their money. One weekend I laid it all out for her. She laughed. Did I say something funny? I asked. No, Chad. It's just hard to see you as a bad guy, she said. Good. That's what I aim for. I told her. We dreamed about quitting this life. She was all in. Where to? Spain or Cyprus, I thought. Wouldn't they track us down? She worried. I just smiled. Only if I slip up. I'll stay sharp and soon we can leave this all behind. She looked around our home, lost in thought. It's hard to think about leaving this place. I do love our house and the area. I had the same thoughts. The top part of our house was so nice to live in. Well, maybe we can get a big house by the sea and spend winter in a warm place. Her face brightened up. Can we talk about it? Is that okay? I don't see why not. If that's what you want, let's start looking now. How about a sunny getaway? I'd love that. I can buy tiny bikinis and get a nice tan, or even go with no top. And if you're really good, I might even take off everything when it's just us two. She laughed with a twinkle in her eye. Then you can hug me whenever you want. She paused, a teasing look in her eyes. I thought we should book that vacation right away. The adventure sounded too good to wait. I know some men wouldn't take back a wife who was unfaithful. That's their choice. I chose differently. Lily made a big mistake and got into a bad situation. I've read a lot after Terry Dax talked about it, about how date drugs work differently on everyone. Bennington was smart. He knew how to pick his target and when to give the drug. In the end, he paid Haskins a lot, and I paid for his actions. But Lily paid the most. There comes a time when you have to forget about pride and think with your heart. Love, not pride, should make our choices. Not every time, since each case is different. My wife will have to live with what happened to her, both in her mind and body, forever. Some say once a cheater, always a cheater. But that saying isn't always right. One evening, the news talked about a guy being found dead in the Thames by the river police. The police said his hurts came before he fell into the water, and it looked like an acid attack did it. 2 months later, a news report one night made me think back to my talk with Frank. It seems a man in Sudbury Open Prison got hurt bad. Someone took a simple dining knife from the kitchen, made it sharp, and cut up the man's face and neck. The cuts were deep, but not deadly. Still, the man, a Bennington, would have bad scars forever. Hey listeners, if you enjoyed watching this video and want to stay updated with our latest content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss out on what's coming next. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video with Queen Cheating Tales.